Hi, this is Jack Miller, the president and CEO of T360. We're back again for an Ask T3 today on one of our special topics from this year's Swanepoel Trends Report. The Swanepoel Trends Report, as many that have followed us for years know, we spend the summer and early fall cataloging the most impactful trends in residential real estate industry, things that we think every brokerage leader, team leader, top agent, franchise executive, MLS executive, association executive, anybody that's connected into the residential real estate space should be apprised of these trends, should be thinking about them, building them into their strategies, and really going deep. We picked for our first trend to talk about from the Trends Report, the comprehensive marketplace and what is happening with the comprehensive marketplace in the United States. And for this discussion, I would like to bring on Clint Skutchan, who is our Senior Vice President of Organized Real Estate, to have a little dialogue about the comprehensive marketplace and what this trend is, what's happening. How are you, Clint? It's great to have you on.
Yeah, great to see you. Glad we agreed on the Men in Black theme today.
We did. Yeah, we did. Yeah. I got the memo. So, we have to be fast on these podcasts because everybody's attention wanders. So I'm going to jump right into this and get into this trend. And first, I'd like to talk about defining what is the comprehensive marketplace. How do we define that? Frame it. Give us some parameters when we talk about the comprehensive marketplace. What are we really talking about?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll start with the plug, right? Like, read the chapter because I think it's really well written to help folks orient towards what is this comprehensive marketplace that we're talking about. And I think it's something that you really do need to become familiar and well versed in addressing and speaking to, especially if you are amongst my clientele in the organized real estate space. We need to be able to tell the story of what is really the U.S. marketplace. Like, this is a fancy term for the U.S. marketplace, but it is just so unique. It's so efficient. And to this point, it's been really beautifully constructed to make sure that there's a lot of transparency, fairness, and exposure, both for those who are selling and those who are buying. And so for me, Jack, it's as simple as saying the comprehensive marketplace is what almost every American consumer and practitioner knows the everyday experience of real estate in the US to be. And it's just, unfortunately, for many around the world, not like that elsewhere, where it's not a comprehensive marketplace.
Yeah, and we have some unusual advantages that people don't recognize if you've only done real estate here, where in other countries, you can't count on the listings online being accurate. You might even have the same listing with multiple brokers. I know that's a common practice in Europe, that they have open listings and everybody's just kind of marketing each other's listings. There can be very different information about listings online, and that kind of high quality, accurate marketplace is really special. But it's one of these things where we kind of just take it for granted because that's how most of us grew up with in real estate. Talk to us a little bit about we have had some changes in this marketplace in the last year. Obviously, the Sitzer-Burnett lawsuit and the impact to cooperative compensation. Tell us a little bit about that and how that has impacted the marketplace.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's had a significant impact for association and MLS leaders who are trying to understand how do you communicate your value proposition for a long-standing period of time. It's basically been cooperation compensation, and they were tied together. And obviously, the MLS was, by just its positioning, central to the marketplace, not only from the exposure and the cooperation, but how folks actually transacted and got paid. So now that that's been taken out, it certainly has changed the focus on, and I think we've heard industry leaders throughout organized real estate say now we've got to double down on the cooperation aspect. And so for me in particular, when I'm talking to organized real estate leaders, it's really important that we move away from what has been largely compulsion models, like you have to do this and this is the only way that it works, to now we really have to incentivize and even inspire, this continued cooperation. And so what that does mean is that you still focus heavily on that cooperation piece, but how you go at solving for that and incentivizing it might be differently than it has been in the past. And now, effectively, I know we'll likely end up going here shortly, Jack, it's not just about your strategies as a MLS organization. It's now being significantly impacted by the brokerage strategies that we're seeing evolve since the outcome of the suits, as well as the marketplaces that we've been existing in here over the last 5-6 years.
Yeah, I don't think we can touch this topic without delving into exclusive listing strategies, which obviously were at play. We've been writing about them in the Trends Report for several years. We published about them in the Opportunity Report last year. But the fact that now we have a huge mega merger, which one of the hot topics in that merger is, what does this do in an environment where one of the players is really forcefully utilizing an exclusive listing strategy, and there are other major brokers that are using it too. So talk to us about this exclusive listing strategy. Who's using it? How does this play out? How could it impact the comprehensive marketplace?
Yeah, well, I think, this is kind of at the core of defining the comprehensive marketplace, right? Is what you're talking about. It's the exposure that's attached to the property. It's not just about whether it ends up in an MLS or it doesn't, because now there's various iterations. It, come into the MLS and be exposed fully, partially, not at all, in some instances, depending on how the MLSs have responded to their marketplace. But like there are what is outlined in the chapter of these standard listings, which I would say are comprehensive exposure listings. In other words, it's omnipresent, through the MLS, it gets into the brokerage environment, into the portal environment for all the consumers and practitioners who like to see all of it. But then, as you point out, there are a lot of these new exclusive, which means partial or niche exposure, that are being deployed by the brokerages, which impact then the MLSs in terms of what data gets ingested in, because it's really important for, obviously, not only exposure to the marketplace, but intelligence against the marketplace, pricing considerations, valuations, all those other pieces that, again, that cooperative environment the MLS has had, has really promoted, and where the standard or comprehensive exposure piece was there for all properties. It was really easy to have that data. Now, where you have different phased approaches by brokerages being utilized, it means that then when data does come into the MLS, it may be coming in with a different reality by the time that data hits that environment, if it comes in at all. And I think that's some of the real questions about how far do you go, where we take the standard or comprehensive exposure marketplace to a niche or a limited exposure marketplace. And what does that do then for the overall impact to the environments where you see 25, 30% now not necessarily coming into that comprehensive exposure environment?
Yeah, I mean, you're comparing apples and oranges when you talk about, how long has the listing been marketed? And it's like, well, to what degree was it marketed? Was it marketed only internally in one firm? Was it marketed privately? Was it marketed openly? Is it full, comprehensive listing? And it becomes difficult maybe to compare those. Talk to us a little bit about the competitive pressure. I mean, if you have a major player in a market that maybe has 20 to 30 to 40% market share, like, what are the competitive pressures if you have a player that is holding back some of its listings on the other players in that market?
Yeah, I think I go back to I saw you do at one of these similar events earlier, where the two of you were talking about, it's kind of like game theory, which is, if you don't, then does the other person then get all the advantages? So therefore, you're almost compelled into doing it in order to be in the game. And I think that's real. It's certainly real in some of those marketplaces where we see significant shares, of market by a single or a grouping of brokerages, even before or outside of the, CCP related conversations. Howard Hanna, for example, in the MLS Now marketplace in Cleveland, Ohio, where they have a significant marketplace, they were using the virtual office web exchange to drive traffic to their sites, where then consumers had to log in because they have a huge swath of market capacity there. So when they do that, it has downstream impacts on everyone else. And I think that's the question that a lot of folks, and especially in the brokerage environment, are asking themselves of, how do we prepare for this if we don't have those same large swaths of marketplace? What are our strategies? What are the things that we need to be doing now to prepare for if these, through the game theory of everybody does it, one does it, everyone has to, how do we do it if we don't have that same level of market, exposure?
Bottom line, are these exclusives? Is this innovation or erosion of the open marketplace? How do you view that question?
Well, I mean, I come from the organized real estate place, and so for me, I worry about, like, not only the impacts to MLSs and think a lot through that lens, but I'm a sociology major by training, so I think a lot through a socioeconomic lens. And for me, the fracturing of what has been so amazing and efficient and known as the comprehensive marketplace in the US has not only had huge benefits for the consumers and the practitioners, but the communities at large. Having a really efficient, transparent, fluid real estate system allows for so many activities to occur around them that drive economies, that impact communities. And so for me, it has such a high level of importance. There's a real concern of experimenting with this to see, oh, well, we could fracture the marketplace and it'll be fine. It won't be that big of a deal. It is central to the economies, the way that communities are developed, the way that people buy and sell homes, and what they do to house their families. And so I think that it's really a bit of a game of roulette to start messing around with something that we know for a fact has significant value at a social scale, to now say, well, we were going to get this significant competitive benefit just for our company, even if it comes at the cost of the consumer. And by the way, the practitioners too. If you're beholden to the inventory of the collective company, you as an agent may be more beholden to that company because of that. So while it may feel good in a recruitment standpoint, ask yourself the question of how would it feel if you were exiting and didn't have that inventory?
Yeah. That's a good point. I have to represent a little bit of the other side because I was a broker,
Go for it.
We did some pre-MLS marketing. We did some price testing. We did some things like that. And I think there's definitely a balance between, creative flexibility in marketing programs and how you want to work with, especially with certain kinds of clientele, and the needs of the open marketplace. And I think that's the nature. In the chapter, we explore that. And that's the nature of the conversation, is how do you balance those interests in a way that is fair to all parties and also create some potential ways of doing things a little differently than we've done.
Well, Jack, I'll share with you my personal bent on this is that I'm not one to try and dictate or prescribe you can only do these types of activities. I think there are places in the market where, like you point out, that those are even needed services to better benefit the consumer. It's just a matter of, at what point, does that become general practice versus specific practice? And if it becomes general practice, there are real concerns around that. But I would rather that we less prescribe that through rules and policy making, and then adapt rather than be adaptive to when it does have a detrimental impact, or we start to see indicators of that changing, then respond to it in those instances rather than just trying to prescribe across all these various marketplaces. Because there is importance to having brokers be able to innovate, and especially in this world today, right? Like we found out in the last week or so, like there's a whole new level of innovation that's going to come around AI and the way that consumers interact with this environment.
Yeah, just in the last week that's happened, and it seems like almost every week we have something like that in this industry. So, tell us what's at stake. What are the real world implications if a lot of listings move off of our comprehensive marketplaces that we have today, or a significant number of them do? What's the result of that? What are the consequential outcomes?
Well, obviously it's going to have some brokerage-based impacts that I'll probably leave to you to pontificate on rather than mine. But I think in the MLS environment, if you're starting to see a lot of scale and a lot of, whether it's just positioning or even demanding of things to operate a certain way to benefit that single brokerage model, that really puts a lot of pressure on the MLSs. So for the MLSs, the real world impacts here are the more and more we see this type of strategy. And if we do further see the erosion, and frankly, like coming out of the changes to the compensation structures, there was real conversations that we had in the trends reports about, further concentration and consolidation at the top end. And the middle is starting to be eroded. Right. And so then in a MLS environment, it's difficult to balance the different needs and recommendations and wants of really large brokerages against single brokerages today. If that middle erodes and there's less connectivity and it's less of a complete spectrum, and it's really two ends of the spectrum only and exclusively, that makes MLS decision making very difficult. There are also questions about what this means long-term for the number of subscribers, and MLSs are highly dependent on subscriber revenue right now. And so the real world aspects for me, and getting back into that, where the MLSs need to be focused on incentivizing further cooperation, is to look at how can you incentivize getting that data into the environment and better utilizing the data and leveraging that as an alternative revenue source, but also more importantly, in most instances, better intelligence against a changing world in more real time. And so if we can get to those levels, I think those are the real world impacts for MLSs. And under those circumstances, with consolidation of brokerages, meaning they're covering more marketplaces, creating more MLS overlap, that drives a lot of pressure on MLSs to further consolidate, not only from the brokers putting that pressure there, but the ability to compete, because we have haves and have-nots in the MLS environment right now. And that's not just about revenue, although by the time you get to the top 250 MLSs of the roughly 500 in the country, 97% of all revenue has been extracted. So half of our MLSs in this country are running on 3% of the revenue. And it's just, we're really heavy top loaded. And that's just the revenue. But against that, it's not just the money. It's about the resources and the capacity. Think about like any good, solid, business. When you have more money and resources, you typically have better staffing, better executives, better decision making. And so for the MLSs, this is going to further exacerbate a lot of the pressures that we've seen over the last 2 years and the acceleration of conversations with like-sized entities about partnering up.
Yeah, that is a significant outcome, and I'll just say, I mean, we were promised by media and many people that this lawsuit that changed the way things was going to happen would drive costs down. I do not see, this is just my personal opinion, I do not see that if we have a lot of listings that are now in lots of different places, how that is going to drive costs down for the buyer's agent that is looking for a home for their client, or how it's going to drive costs down for the marketing and selling of real estate. We have a very efficient system, like we said earlier, where, hey, it's a subscription system. It's inexpensive, versus now if we break it apart, now we have to remarket these listings. We have to get in front of consumers again. It's very challenging, where we have a system today where you can inexpensively expose your listing to every realtor, every agent that is shopping with a legitimate buyer in a marketplace. So that's a pretty big change.
Well, that last point you make is a huge one, Jack. Like the thing about our efficient system and the way that it was designed and built and the way that the cooperation and compensation were paired together meant that the agents onboarded a ton of marketing based costs, right? Like it was just cooked into the system. And the more that the market might fracture, the harder it is to get comprehensive exposure, the more you may be compelled as a consumer, not just the agent, but the consumer having to spend dollars. If you look at the amount that folks spend in Australia in that system, it can be anywhere from $10,000 to $20,000+ on the consumer directly to market those. So that's another real world outcome of some of this that could occur because of not just the changes in the comprehensive marketplace, but the changes associated with our compensation structures in the US as well. And I think good people will get paid more, because people will pay for quality that nets them better results.
Yep. That's that. It's sort of the comparison I've been using is like, we have delivery via the postal service. It's inexpensive, it's highly efficient, and it goes everywhere. Versus, you could deliver things via FedEx or UPS, but you pay a premium for that, and you pay more for that. And they're different services. They're used in different aspects. But if we don't have the postal service anymore, or it's not reliable and effective, then you end up paying more because now you're paying all your money to UPS and FedEx in order to deliver everything. So that's the difference. Well, let's round the corner here and talk about turning this insight into strategy for next year. What do you think, and how would you advise MLSs, association leaders, brokerages to plan for potentially a less comprehensive marketplace, a marketplace where more listings are held off of the MLS or held off the MLS for a period of time?
Well, I think I'd start leaning into a message that I know Craig Cheatham from the Realty Alliance, he delivered it pretty stridently at their most recent Council of Multiple Listing Services conference. And that was, get back in front of your brokers if you're an MLS, like spend time with them, talk with them, understand. The things will be changing. There will be different strategies deployed. And if you're not working with your brokers to understand what that looks like, from, you know, a 2 to 3 person brokerage to a 2 to 3,000 person brokerage, that's going to put you at a deficit. So I really do think that outreach, that understanding and appreciation for what will incentivize and encourage brokers to continue to participate in this, again, very efficient system, it is going to be mission critical for the MLSs as a starting point. You know, this one's a little bit less tactical and more at a general strategy level, but this is something that I know projects that you and I are working on, Jack, come into play. The MLSs and by extension, the associations need to do a really good job of explaining the comprehensive marketplace and advocating for it. And not necessarily through a typical political advocacy, but I would say intelligence-based advocacy with all the insights, the realities of when the marketplace shifts and changes. This is what I was talking about before, Jack, of working in front of the likely changes in these new marketplaces, because you have information and indicators and metrics that start to point a certain direction. And then you have to be willing to educate a lot of the decision makers as to what that looks like, from decision makers as consumers, because certainly they have influence over not only marketplace, but political outcomes, but also talking to regulators and talking to legislators. I think that's something the MLSs haven't been a part of. It's been the association's domain, but there needs to be a story told about the beauty of the North American real estate system. And yes, the MLS is an underpinning of that, but it is not the only part of that. The marketplace itself certainly feeds into it, and a fractured one makes it more difficult to retain that beauty.
Yeah, and I think from a broker strategy perspective, and you know, we've been talking to brokers about this for the last several years. You know, you have to be ready to respond in a marketplace and say, look, I need to have my own way that I talk about how we market and sell homes, that's compelling to the consumer, that delves into all the value benefit that they get from using a comprehensive marketplace strategy or using a limited strategy. Like, you need to be facile in that. You need to be facile in that and talking to your agents about it, because your agents are going to come to you and say, hey, I've heard XYZ company is doing this and that's better. Can you tell me why or why not? And why are we doing what we're doing? Why is what we're doing better? And how is it philosophically aligned with how I want to serve my clients? So that's one part of it. And the other part I'd say is that there's things that this industry does better together. And this is one of them. You know, I'd say that when we surveyed everybody and had conversations with everybody last year for the opportunity report, comprehensively people said lobbying. When this industry gets together and lobbies, we're all together. I would also say one of the things this industry does well when it's better together is works with data. When we work with data together, we get better insights. Even if you have a lot of market share in a given area, the fact that you can share that data and get feedback and look at the data through the entire marketplace provides bigger benefits than any one player. Even a large percentage, even if you're 30% of the market, that's 70% of the market you're not getting visibility into, right? So it's enough where the sharing of that data is high value. And I think that's where the MLSs have an opportunity, is to say, look, we're going to really show you how valuable this data is, even to the big players. There's no question it's valuable to the smaller players, but to the big players as well. This is valuable to have all our data together and to be able to look at things comprehensively. I'm sorry, the US consumer, the Canadian consumer, we're used to it. We are used to getting great data. We're used to being able to tell what's going on. We're used to the transparency. I think if that starts to erode, there will be some market impacts from that. There will be people that say, you know what, I don't like this, right? I don't like having to search 3 or 4 or 5 different websites to find things. I'd rather go to one place and find everything. So I think that's the other part of this message, is be careful. Be careful what you wish for.
Agreed. Right? And related to that data piece, you know, this is one of the more tactical areas, and although it's strategic in nature and that it requires real true investment in this, is the technology solutions, right? Like, if you want to incentivize the input, you've got to streamline it and make it easier. We know that that's a frustration, you know, especially across a multiple MLS environment for brokers, you know, where they're paying multiple admins to be able to get in against different rule sets or whatever it might be. I mean, you and I know this from some of the work that we're doing, you know, throughout the country right now. The brokers are telling us this problem. So if you're not talking to brokers and finding out what those pain points are and solving for them, that's going to be the initial problem. But then once they tell you, hey, like, we've got these problems that require changes in how we ingest data into the MLS environment and ultimately get it back out, then there needs to be some technology investments. And some of those, again, Jack, I think to your point, the flip side of the brokers working together through the organized real estate's got to do a better job of working with each other. Because look, the largest MLSs in the country are only 100,000 approximately in subscriber counts. When you start talking about technology, innovation, and delivery, it takes hundreds upon hundreds, if not millions of people to get to true like technology innovation and doing it at scale with efficiency and getting that in. And I think that pain point of getting the data into the MLS becomes more exacerbated if they don't have to put it into the MLS to succeed. And so I think those are some more tactical pieces of really assessing what are those ways in which you can address the technology issues to get to the broker pain point while accelerating your value and the intelligence that you have through the collective data.
Yeah, loud and clear. And I had a lot of conversations with multi-market brokers in this last 6 or 7 months for some project work, and wow, the challenges of that and how much demand there is for MLSs to meet that challenge, it's out there. So guys, we could go on and on about this topic. Clint and I have a lot of gas for this, but I encourage you, pick up a copy on pre-order, the Swanepoel Trends Report. It is in pre-order now. It's the best way to make sure you've got this in your hands. Great chapter. It kicks off the whole report. We'll do some more of these on some other topics from the Swanepoel Trends Report. Clint, I really appreciate you coming on today and sharing with us your perspective. And for everybody that's watching, we look forward to having you on our next upcoming Ask T3 sessions, and especially those that we're going to do on the Swanepoel Trends Report for the next few months. Everyone, thank you so much and have a great day.
Thanks, Jack.